Imagine waking up every single day in a literal paradise, surrounded by 37 siblings who love you and a mother whose only goal in life is to keep you safe, fed, and happy. You spend your afternoons running through emerald green forests, playing hide and seek, and your evenings eating gourmet meals around a candlelit table. There are no worries, no pain, and no shadows, just the warmth of a home called Grace Field House. But what if I told you that every hug from your mother was actually a measurement? Every delicious meal was a way to marinate your muscles, and the very walls protecting you were actually the boundaries of a slaughterhouse. In this world, love isn't a gift, it's a seasoning. And for the children of Gracefield, the perfect life they've been living is nothing more than a high-quality lie designed to keep their meat tender. This is the story of how a group of geniuses discovered they weren't orphans, but livestock, and their desperate gamble to outsmart a godlike enemy before the harvest begins. The story takes place in a world where humanity seems to have vanished, replaced by an idyllic countryside centered around a massive mansion. Here, we meet our protagonist, Emma, an 11-year-old girl with boundless energy and a heart too big for her own good. She's one of the top 3 students at the orphanage, alongside the tactical genius Norman and the cynical, sharp-witted Ray. In this world, the children live under the care of Mama Isabella, a woman who radiates grace and maternal affection. Every day, the kids are subjected to rigorous intelligence tests, and every day, Emma, Norman, and Ray score perfect marks. Life is perfect, governed by only one rule: never, under any circumstances, go near the gate that leads to the outside world. It's a rule they never thought to question because, in their minds, the outside world was just a place where they'd eventually be sent to live with foster families. But that was just the beginning of a nightmare that would shatter their reality forever. It all starts on a cold evening when a young girl named Connie is told she's finally being adopted. The entire house gathers to say a tearful goodbye, watching as Connie clutches her favorite stuffed bunny and walks toward the gate with Mama. But in the rush of the moment, Connie leaves her bunny behind. Refusing to let her friend leave without her most prized possession, Emma and Norman decide to break the house's only rule. They sprint through the dark woods, hearts racing with a mix of rebellion and kindness, reaching the gate just as the silence begins to feel heavy. They find the truck parked in the shadows, but as Emma reaches into the back to leave the toy, she finds something else entirely. She finds Connie. Not a happy Connie heading to a new home, but a cold, lifeless body with a strange red flower blooming from her chest. The shock is paralyzing, but the real horror arrives when they hear voices, monstrous, distorted voices. Hiding under the truck, Emma and Norman look up to see creatures out of a fever dream. Massive, multi-eyed demons who speak of human meat as if it's a luxury commodity. They watch in terror as their beloved Mama, the woman they called Mother, speaks to these monsters with cold, professional detachment. She isn't their protector, she's a farm manager. Grace Fieldhouse isn't an orphanage, it's a high-end ranch for the elite of the demon world. And the adoption they've been celebrating? It was just the delivery date for a fresh kill. This is where everything changes. In an instant, the sunlight of their childhood is snuffed out, replaced by the suffocating realization that they are nothing more than food waiting to be eaten. Emma and Norman barely manage to escape back to the house, their lungs burning and their minds fracturing. The silence of the mansion, which once felt peaceful, now feels predatory. Every floorboard creak sounds like a death knell. They realize that the intelligence tests they've been taking weren't for education, they were to develop their brains, the most delicious part of the human body for these demons. The higher the score, the more valuable the meat. As the top scorers, Emma, Norman, and Ray are the premium quality goods, the main course for the demons' upcoming feast. But Emma refuses to accept a fate where she simply waits to die. She looks at Norman, the fear in her eyes hardening into a desperate resolve. They have to escape. They have to take every single child with them. But the real nightmare was about to start. As they begin to plan, they realize the odds are stacked impossibly against them. The house is surrounded by a massive wall, the forest is a maze, and Mama isn't just a caretaker. She's a highly trained agent who knows exactly how to manipulate children. When they tell Ray about the truth, his reaction isn't one of shock, but of cold calculation. He's the one who points out the most terrifying detail. They are being tracked. Deep inside their ears, hidden beneath the skin, are tracking devices that tell Mama their exact location at all times. They aren't just in a house, they are in a high-tech cage. Every move they make, every whisper in the hallway, and every secret glance is being monitored by a woman who smiles at them while imagining them on a silver platter. The tension escalates when Mama begins to drop subtle hints that she knows someone was at the gate. She doesn't scream, she doesn't punish. She simply tightens the noose with a terrifying, gentle smile. She introduces a new player to the game, Sister Krone. Krone is a powerhouse of a woman, brought in to provide extra security and to keep a constant eye on the children. With two adults watching their every move and tracking chips embedded in their bodies, the hope of escape feels like a fading dream. Emma and Norman start training the other kids under the guise of playing tag, teaching them how to move silently and think tactically. But as they push their limits, they realize that Mama is always one step ahead. It's a psychological chess match where the price of a wrong move is death. What Emma didn't know was that the betrayal went even deeper than she could have imagined. As they work to find a way to break the trackers and scale the wall, a dark shadow looms over their group. Someone among the children might be an informant, a spy for Mama who is feeding her their every plan. The walls are closing in, the harvest date is approaching, and the girl who once believed in the power of love is learning that in a world of monsters, you have to become a demon yourself just to survive the night. But as they prepare for their first move, a sudden realization hits Norman. If they want to escape, they don't just need a ladder. They need to break the person who built the cage. The worst kind of enemy isn't the monster waiting outside the gate. It's the one sitting right next to you at the dinner table, sharing your bread and laughing at your jokes. After the horrific discovery of Connie's fate, Emma and Norman realize that their escape plan is being leaked. Mama Isabella always seems to be one step ahead, her gaze lingering a little too long on the very spots where they hide their supplies. Norman, the master strategist, concludes that there is a traitor among the children, a spy who has traded the lives of their siblings for a few more years of survival. The air in Grace Field House, once filled with the scent of lilies and home-cooked meals, now reeks of paranoia. Every smile feels like a mask, and every "I love you" feels like a death sentence. But Norman isn't just going to sit back and let their plan crumble. He decides to set a trap that will expose the rat, even if it means breaking his own heart in the process. Norman sets up a brilliant psychological gambit, telling two of their older siblings, Don and Gilda, different locations for where he's hidden the escape tools. If Mama finds the rope in a specific spot, they'll know exactly who talked. But as the sun sets and the shadows lengthen across the wooden floors, the truth that emerges is far more devastating than a simple betrayal. The traitor isn't just anyone, it's Ray, the cynical, book-smart boy who has been their best friend since they were toddlers. When Norman confronts him in the hallway, the air turns ice cold. Ray doesn't even bother to deny it. He stares back with eyes that have seen too much, admitting that he has been Mama's hound for years. He's been the one feeding her information, keeping the children manageable, and ensuring that no one ever suspected the truth. But this is where everything changes. Ray isn't just a traitor, he's a triple agent. He reveals to a stunned Norman that he's known the truth about the farm since he was a baby. While most children lose their infant memories, Ray remembers it all: the cold metal of the processing facility, the dark faces of the demons, and the moment he was branded with a serial number. He hasn't been working for Mama to save himself. He's been playing a long, agonizing game of chess to ensure that Emma and Norman, the two people he cares about most, are the ones who get to live. He's been trading information for years to get his hands on experimental parts, slowly building a device that can neutralize the tracking chips in their ears. He's the architect of their survival, built on a foundation of lies and blood. But his plan has a dark cost. He only intends to save Emma and Norman. To Ray, the other children are dead weight that will only get them caught. This creates a brutal ideological rift within the group. Emma, the moral compass, refuses to leave anyone behind. She wants a revolution, not just a getaway. But while they argue over the ethics of survival, a new player enters the board with the subtlety of a sledgehammer, Sister Krone. Unlike Mama's quiet, calculated menace, Krone is a whirlwind of chaotic energy. She's physically imposing, incredibly fast, and she has her own agenda. She wants Isabella's job, and she knows that if she can catch the children in the act of escaping, she can prove Isabella is incompetent and take over as the new mama. Krone corners the kids and offers them an unholy alliance. She promises to give them information about the outside world and the tracking devices if they help her take down Isabella. It's a deal with the devil, and Emma knows that one wrong word will lead them all to the harvest. What they didn't know was that Sister Krone was just a pawn in a much larger game. During their alliance meetings, Krone reveals a terrifying secret. There are other farms. Gracefield is just one of many premium facilities, and the world outside is a sprawling network of human livestock production. She shows them a pen, a specialized tool used by a mysterious man named William Minerva, who seems to have left clues for the children within the library books. This gives Emma a flicker of hope. If there's someone on the outside helping them, maybe they actually have a chance. But as they gather more information, the tension between Mama and Sister Krone reaches a breaking point. Isabella isn't blind to Krone's ambition, and she has no intention of letting a subordinate ruin her perfect record. The psychological warfare escalates when Isabella delivers a final, crushing blow to Sister Krone. She hands her an official letter, a promotion, that is actually a death warrant. As Krone is escorted to the gate, she realizes too late that she was never a player. She was just a temporary distraction. In her final moments, facing a high-ranking demon and the cold gaze of the grandmother who oversees all the mamas, Krone leaves one last gift for the children, the key to the truth about the tracking devices. Her death is swift and silent, a reminder that in this world, even the adults are just higher-value cattle. With Krone gone, Isabella turns her full, undivided attention back to her precious children. The mask of the loving mother finally slips, revealing the predator underneath. Mama confronts Emma and Norman in the woods, far from the prying eyes of the other kids. She doesn't use weapons. She doesn't need to. She simply tells them to give up. She offers them a deal. If they stop resisting and live out their remaining days in peace, she will ensure they are shipped with dignity and no pain. She talks about the outside world as a wasteland where they will only find suffering, claiming that dying as high-quality meat is the greatest mercy she can give them. But Emma's resolve is iron. She lunges toward the wall, desperate to scout the perimeter one last time. In a terrifying display of strength, Isabella grabs Emma and, with a sickening crack, breaks her leg. The sound echoes through the trees, a brutal punctuation to the end of their childhood innocence. But the real nightmare was about to start. With Emma immobilized and the escape plan seemingly in ruins, Isabella drops the ultimate bombshell. The harvest schedule has been moved up. They don't have weeks left. They don't even have days. She looks at Norman with a chilling, triumphant smile and delivers the news that shatters their world. Norman is being shipped out tomorrow. The tactical heart of their group, the boy who was supposed to lead them to freedom, has just been handed his expiration date. As Emma screams in pain and Ray stands frozen in shock, the realization hits them like a physical blow. The clock has run out, and the demon is coming for the best of them. The sound of a bone snapping is something you never truly forget, especially when it's the sound of your own hope breaking. The reality of their situation finally became undeniable. They weren't just playing a game of tag anymore. They were in a cage with a predator that had grown tired of playing with its food. Isabella didn't just break Emma's leg to stop her from running. She did it to send a message to Norman and Ray. The message was simple. I own you. I own your bodies, your minds, and your very futures. And now, the most valuable piece on the board, Norman was being called to the slaughterhouse weeks ahead of schedule. The premium shipment was moving forward, and there was nothing the children could do to stop the inevitable clock from ticking towards zero. But Isabella's cruelty went even deeper than physical violence. While Emma was bedridden, Mama sat by her side, tending to the injury she caused with the tenderness of a saint. She leaned in close and whispered an offer that would haunt Emma forever. She told Emma that she was special, that if she gave up on her siblings and focused on her own survival, Isabella could recommend her to be trained as a mama. It was a glimpse into the cycle of horror that kept this world running. To survive, you had to become the very thing that fed children to demons. You had to sacrifice your humanity to keep your pulse. Emma, through her tears and pain, realized that Isabella wasn't just a villain. She was a victim of the same system, a survivor who had traded her soul for a seat at the table. But that was just the beginning of the psychological war. Norman, the boy who always had a plan, was suddenly faced with a problem he couldn't think his way out of. Ray and Emma begged him to run to disable his tracker and hide in the forest until they could find a way to escape together. They had the device Ray had spent years building, and they were willing to risk everything to keep Norman alive. But Norman knew something they didn't. He knew that if he ran, the security would tighten so much that Emma and Ray would never have a chance to escape. He knew that if he disappeared, Mama would punish the remaining children to draw him out. He was the sacrifice required to keep the hope of the others alive. Yet Ray wouldn't take no for an answer. He forced the neutralization device into Norman's hands and told him to scout the wall one last time before hiding. The tension reached a fever pitch as Norman climbed the massive stone wall surrounding the property. This was the moment they had been working toward for months. If he could just see what was on the other side, they would finally have a map to freedom. But as Norman reached the top and looked out over the horizon, his face went pale. He didn't see a forest or a village. He didn't see a way out. He looked down and saw a sheer vertical drop, a massive moat that separated the farm from the rest of the world. It wasn't just a wall, it was a fortress. And this is where everything changes. Norman realized that even if they managed to get over the stone, they were trapped by a physical abyss that no child could ever hope to cross. What he didn't know was that his return would be even more heartbreaking than his departure. Instead of hiding in the woods as Ray had planned, Norman walked back into the house and looked his friends in the eye with a calm, terrifying smile. He told them about the cliff, but he also told them something else. He was ready to go. He refused to let any of the other children suffer for his sake. The emotional weight of that moment was suffocating. Ray, the boy who had spent 6 years of his life becoming a spy just to save Norman, was forced to watch as his best friend willingly walked toward his death. The genius of Gracefield had decided that his final move would be to die so that the others could find a way to live. Norman, dressed in his best white clothes, packed a small suitcase with nothing but a few memories, and said his final goodbyes. The younger children cried, thinking he was going to a wonderful new home, while Emma and Ray stood frozen in a grief so deep it looked like catatonia. Emma tried one last desperate move, lunging at Norman to try and force the tracker disabling device onto him, but Norman just hugged her. He whispered a final secret into her ear, a detail he had noticed from the top of the wall that gave them one last sliver of a chance. And then, he walked out the door with Isabella, his silhouette disappearing into the dark hallway of the gate. But the real nightmare was about to start for the ones left behind. With Norman gone, the house fell into a deathly silence. Ray, broken by the failure of his 6-year plan, retreated into a shell of cold despair. He stopped reading, stopped talking, and stopped caring. Emma, with her legs still in a cast, seemed to have lost her spark entirely. She spent her days staring out the window, looking like a ghost of the girl she used to be. Isabella watched them with a sense of triumph, believing she had finally broken their spirits. She thought the game was over. She thought that by removing the brain of the operation, she had turned the remaining children back into compliant livestock. Months passed in a blur of gray routine. The calendar flipped toward January Ray's 12th birthday and the date of his own shipment. As the night before the harvest arrived, Ray sat in the library, staring at the oil lamp on the table. He looked at Emma, who seemed just as hollow as he was, and revealed his final, gruesome plan. He wasn't going to let the demons eat him. He wasn't going to let Isabella win. He had spent years dousing himself in oil, and he was going to turn himself into a human bonfire, burning the house and his own high-quality meat to the ground so the others could escape in the chaos. But as he struck the match, a sudden look in Emma's eyes told him that he had made a massive mistake. The flame of the match flickered in Ray's hand, casting a dancing shadow against the library walls that looked more like a demon than a boy. He was ready. He had poured gallons of oil over himself and the floor, intending to turn his own body into a pyre that would burn Grace Fieldhouse to the ground. In his mind, this was the only way to win to deny the demons their premium meal and create a distraction so massive that Emma could lead the others out. But just as he moved to drop the match, Emma moved faster. She didn't scream, she didn't cry. She looked him dead in the eye and blew the match out. That's when Ray realized the truth. The hollow, broken girl he had been mourning for months was a ghost, a perfect performance designed to fool both him and Mama Isabella. Emma hadn't been giving up, she had been preparing. While Ray was drowning in his own despair, Emma had been secretly coordinating with Don and Gilda, training the younger children and stockpiling supplies right under Isabella's nose. She revealed that Norman hadn't just left a secret in her ear, he had left a literal manual for survival. He had predicted Ray's suicidal plan and instructed Emma to stop him, because a victory that requires the death of a brother isn't a victory at all. This is where everything changes. The plan wasn't just to escape, it was to stage a heist of their own lives. They weren't going to let Ray burn, but they were going to let the house burn. In a flurry of coordinated movement, they began to stage the scene, using the hair and the clothing they had gathered over months to create a decoy that would smell and look like a tragedy. As the oil finally ignited, the orange glow of the fire began to eat through the wood of the mansion. The scent of burning chemicals and hair filled the air, a sickeningly realistic imitation of a human body in the flames. Isabella, who had been calmly preparing for Ray's shipment, bolted toward the dining hall. She arrived to find a wall of fire, and Emma standing there, sobbing, pointing into the inferno where Ray was supposedly burning to death. For the first time in her life, the composed, terrifying Isabella felt the cold grip of genuine panic. If she lost her final premium shipment to a fire, her life was forfeit. But that was just the beginning of the chaos. While Isabella scrambled to save what she thought was a burning child, the rest of the children were already moving like ghosts through the forest. They weren't just running, they were executing a tactical retreat they had practiced hundreds of times under the guise of tag. Every child over the age of 5 was equipped with a bag, a coat, and the knowledge of exactly where to go. But as Isabella realized the body in the fire was a fake, her panic turned into a cold, murderous rage. She checked her tracking device. She reached into the flames and pulled out the tracking devices they had been cut out of the children's ears and left behind. The cage was empty. The livestock had learned how to pick the lock. The children reached the massive stone wall, the very place where Norman had seen the impossible cliff. Ray looked at the sheer drop, the wind howling up from the abyss, and felt the weight of hopelessness returning. He looked at the younger kids, some as small as 6 years old, and realized there was no way they could make the jump. But Emma just smiled, a look of fierce, unshakable confidence that would have made Norman proud. She pulled out a set of makeshift launchers and ropes they had crafted from the house's sturdiest linens and the parts Ray had scavenged over the years. They weren't going to jump across the gap, they were going to fly over it. And this is where the real nightmare for Isabella began. Back at the house, Isabella didn't waste time mourning. She triggered the farm's alarm system, a low-frequency hum that vibrated through the trees, signaling the demons that a jailbreak was in progress. She sprinted through the dark woods, her maternal instinct replaced by the predatory drive of a hunter. She knew exactly where they were going. There was only one part of the wall that wasn't guarded by high-level demons, the part with the cliff. She arrived at the edge of the wall just in time to see the most impossible sight of her career. The children weren't huddled in fear. They were organized. They had turned their bedsheets into zip lines, anchoring them to the trees on the other side of the abyss. One by one, the cattle were sliding into the darkness of the forbidden forest. What Isabella didn't know was that Emma had made a heartbreaking choice. To ensure the survival of the group, she had decided to leave behind all the children under the age of 5. It was a tactical necessity that tore at her soul, but Norman's letter had convinced her. The toddlers wouldn't survive the winter in the wild. And Isabella would never kill them because they represented future profit. By leaving them, Emma was guaranteeing they would stay alive until she could come back for them. As the last of the older children prepared to cross, Isabella stepped out of the shadows, her eyes glowing with a terrifying intensity. She was alone, she was unarmed, but she was still the woman who had raised them. She was still the monster they called Mother. The confrontation at the edge of the cliff was the ultimate psychological showdown. Isabella didn't try to grab them. She tried to talk them down, using the same gentle, manipulative voice she had used to tuck them into bed. She told them the world outside was a hellscape of monsters and starvation, that they were walking into a slow death. But Emma didn't even flinch. She looked at the woman who had broken her leg and fed her siblings to demons, and she felt nothing but pity. As the final rope was cut and the children disappeared into the shadows of the outer world, Isabella stood on the wall, completely alone. But the real nightmare was just about to start for her, because the demons don't accept excuses for a lost shipment. The silence that followed the children's departure was heavier than any scream. Isabella stood at the edge of the abyss, the wind whipping her apron as she stared into the darkness where her precious meat had just vanished. For the first time in years, the calculated, cold farm manager was gone, replaced by a woman who remembered what it felt like to be a girl with a dream. As she looked at the severed ropes dangling from the trees across the moat, a haunting melody drifted through her mind, the song Leslie used to play on his mandolin when they were children. Long before she knew the taste of betrayal, she realized then that Emma hadn't just escaped the farm. She had escaped the cycle of despair that had claimed Isabella's own soul decades ago. This is where everything changes. In a final, silent act of defiance against the system she served, Isabella didn't call for reinforcements. She didn't scream for the demons to hunt them down. Instead, she reached out and pulled the remaining ropes back toward the wall, erasing the evidence of how they had crossed. She turned back toward the burning mansion, her silhouette framed by the orange glow of the dying fire. As she walked through the charred hallways, she found the toddlers, the ones Emma had been forced to leave behind, huddled together in the nursery. They looked up at her with innocent, trusting eyes, unaware that their older siblings had just declared war on the world. Isabella knelt down and gathered them in her arms, a genuine, heartbreaking smile touching her lips. She whispered to them that everything would be okay, even as she knew the grandmother and the demons would soon arrive to demand an explanation for the lost shipments. She had failed her masters, but for the first time in her life, she had succeeded as a mother. She had allowed her children to choose a death in the wild over a life in a cage. But that was just the beginning of a much larger journey for the escapees. On the other side of the moat, the children landed in a world they had only ever seen in picture books. The forest was ancient, the trees towering like stone giants, and the air smelled of damp earth and moss. There was no perimeter, no walls, and no mama to tell them when to wake or sleep. But the freedom they felt was tempered by a cold, biting fear. They were 11 children, some as young as 5, standing in the heart of a demon-controlled wilderness with nothing but the clothes on their backs and a few stolen supplies. Emma looked at the faces of her siblings, Ray, Dawn, Gilda, and the others, and saw the reflection of her own exhaustion. They had won the battle, but the war for their survival had only just begun. The forest wasn't a sanctuary. It was a labyrinth filled with creatures far more primal than the ones they had left behind at the gate. As the first light of dawn began to bleed through the canopy, Ray pulled out the pen they had taken from Sister Krone's belongings. It wasn't just a writing tool. It was a high-tech projector that revealed a hidden map of the area. Following the coordinates left by the mysterious William Minerva, they realized that they weren't just wandering aimlessly. There was a destination, a place where humans could live without being hunted. This was the curiosity gap that kept them moving through the fatigue. Who was Minerva? Was he a human who had infiltrated the demon world? Or was he a demon with a conscience? The hope of finding an ally gave them the strength to push deeper into the woods, leaving the smoking ruins of Gracefield House far behind. But the real nightmare was about to start. Every snap of a twig sounded like a demon's footstep. Every shadow seemed to have teeth. They quickly learned that the outside world was governed by rules they didn't understand. The plants themselves seemed predatory, and the silence of the woods was often broken by the distant, guttural roars of things they couldn't see. Emma, despite her healing leg and the crushing weight of leadership, refused to let the fear take hold. She remembered Norman's smile and his final wish for them to live. She realized that survival wasn't just about running away. It was about building a new world where no child would ever have to be shipped again. They were no longer cattle. They were pioneers in a land of monsters. The resolution of their escape was bittersweet. They had their lives, but they had lost their home and their brother. As they reached a clearing and watched the sun rise over the horizon, the reality of their situation fully set in. They were fugitives in a world that saw them as a delicacy. The final state of our protagonist, Emma, was no longer that of a naive orphan, but of a battle-hardened commander. She looked at the horizon, her eyes burning with a resolve that would eventually shake the very foundations of the demon society. They had crossed the wall, they had cheated death, and they had proven that the human spirit cannot be farmed. The Promised Neverland was no longer a fairy tale. It was a destination they would reach or die trying. The escape from Gracefield House was a masterpiece of strategy and sacrifice, but the forest holds secrets that even Norman couldn't have predicted. They've escaped the ranch, but they've entered the hunting grounds. If you thought the game of tag with Mama was intense, wait until you see what happens when the children encounter the wild demons and the truth behind the promise made 1,000 years ago. The journey has only just started, and the stakes are about to get much, much higher. Emma and her siblings are now out in the wild, but they aren't alone. In the next part, we'll see them encounter the most unexpected allies of all two demons who refuse to eat humans. But can they really be trusted? Or is this just another trap designed to lead the children back to the dinner table? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss the next chapter of this heart-pounding survival story. Comment Neverland below if you think you'd have what it takes to jump that cliff.